We have an exciting visitor with us today. Our very own host and Attorney General Kamala Harris is here. So I'd like to give her a round of applause before I give her a brief introduction. On January 3rd, 2011, Kamala D. Harris was sworn in as the 32nd Attorney General of the state of California. She is the first woman, the first African American, and the first South Asian to hold this office in the history of California. As Chief Law Enforcement Officer for the state, Attorney General Harris has focused on combating transnational gangs that are trafficking guns, drugs, and human beings throughout California. She's fought to reduce truancy among California's elementary school students and ensure that every California child can exercise their constitutional right to an education. Attorney General Harris has worked to increase the adoption of technology and data-driven policing to assist law enforcement in the efficient investigation and prosecution of crime, and has traveled to every region of California to expand partnerships with local law enforcement. Just this week, the Attorney General released Open Justice version 1.1, a first-of-its-kind open data initiative that seeks to make public an unprecedented amount of criminal justice data so that government can hold itself accountable and improve public safety policy. She has also established the California Department of Justice Division of Recidivism, Reduction, and Reentry to reduce crime by getting offenders back on track to productive, law-abiding lives. A career prosecutor, Attorney General Harris has served 2 terms as District Attorney of San Francisco. Born in Oakland, California, Attorney General Harris is a graduate of Howard University, America's oldest historically Black university. She received her law degree from the University of California, Hastings College of the Law. Attorney General Harris is married to Doug Emhoff and is the author of the book Smart on Crime, A Career Prosecutor's Plan to Make Us Safer. Can you please give another warm round of applause for Attorney General Kamala Harris?
Thank you, Kamitri, for that very generous introduction. Well, greetings, everyone, and our distinguished panelists. My goodness, there's so much talent in this room, all in the spirit of celebrating who we are, where we've come from, where we have yet to go. So I just want to thank everyone for being a part of this afternoon's process of really just recognizing the leaders in our legal community and also rededicating ourselves, law students, to why you decided to go to law school and put yourself through this pain in the first place. And those of us who have been practicing for a while to remember all of the ideals that brought us to this profession. Many of you probably know my background. You know, I'm one of two parents who met when they were active in the civil rights movement. My sister Maya, who is also a lawyer, and I, we joke that we grew up surrounded by a bunch of adults who spent full time marching and shouting about this thing called justice. And as we know, the heroes of the civil rights movement, among many, were the architects of the civil rights movement, the lawyers. Thurgood Marshall, Charles Hamilton Houston, Constance Baker Motley, who understood the skill of our profession of law to translate the passion from the streets to the courtrooms of our country, and to do the work that we know must constantly be done, of reminding folks of that great promise we articulated in 1776, that we are all and should be treated as equals. So I know Marty Jenkins has a similar story. I've been knowing him for years. He has been a mentor, a friend, a colleague. But it is the spirit behind all of that that brought many of us to decide at a young age we wanted to be a lawyer. And it was interesting because when I finished law school here at Hastings College of the Law, my family gathered round and they said, "Okay, Kamala, so what have you decided to do in your fight for justice?" And I was really excited, and I got all wound up, and I said, "I've decided to become a prosecutor." And my public defender over here, friend, is laughing because, because my family probably thought that was what I was supposed to be doing. And thought, well, okay, Kamala, that's a curious decision. And with some of them, I had to defend the decision like one would a thesis. But what I said then, and what I maintain today, after a career as a prosecutor and now standing before you as the top cop of the biggest state in this country, is that when we talk about wanting to bring justice to all people, a large part of that is about bringing a voice to some of the most voiceless and vulnerable people. And so I decided that I wanted to be that voice, and in particular represent the targets of crime, people who needed a voice, people who were the victim of child molestation or rape, or families who suffered a murder. And that was the work that I decided to do. I decided to do the work that we do because of everything that is associated with and is behind the pleading document, the document I file every time I do my work. There's a document I file every time I've done my work, whether it was when I was a baby prosecutor in the Alameda County DA's office, or the elected district attorney of San Francisco, or the elected attorney general of California. And you know how that document reads? It never reads the name of the victim versus the name of the defendant. It reads the people versus the defendant. Because in our system of democracy, and equally important, in our system of justice, we have rightly decided that a harm against any one of us is a harm against all of us. A crime against any one of us is a crime against all of us. And we know that it is often the most voiceless and vulnerable people that will be the subject of that harm. And a civil society says, we're not going to make you battle by yourself. We're going to stand with you. It will be all of us standing with you. So let's think about then where we are and the challenges we face. How many law students do we have? Can I see a raise of hands? Oh my goodness. All these impressionable minds. Where do I begin? Where do I end, Marty Jenkins? Take a moment every day to reflect on the power of this education in your profession can bring to the discussion of what does justice look like, and to this process of continuing to give a voice to the most voiceless and vulnerable. And you don't have to practice criminal law to do that. You also know that in whatever you do, Dr. King said it well, make sure yours is a life where you pursue justice. Even if you decide to go and represent one of the startups down the street, right? Or a corporation, or you decide to do wills and trusts or some other thing. Make sure yours is a life that is always about fighting for justice in some capacity. You will have particular skills to do it as a lawyer, but you can do it in so many areas of your life and in so many areas of your work. The work that we have been doing at the Department of Justice has been obviously that, but it's been interesting because we've been taking it on in a way that is about also recognizing the world as it exists today that did not exist when I graduated from this institution. One of the most wonderful things about you all is that you're going to come out of law school and you are going to, by virtue of just this time and place, be leaders. So what am I talking about? Let me tell you. When we came out of law school, most of us came out of law school when we were so junior and low on the totem pole, and things had been done and were being done at that moment when we came out of law school the same way they had been done for 150 years. Things were pretty much the same. And so we were competing and trying to, establish some presence and seniority in this world that existed the same way for a really long time. You all are jumping out of school at a time where this technology that we're creating in our backyard in California is changing long-standing business models. It's changing all of our notions and discussion about what does privacy mean? What does reasonable expectation of privacy mean? We're having whole discussions about what should be the balance between protecting an individual's privacy and law enforcement. Have you all been reading the paper around that? It's so exciting. And you all are graduating at a moment, you will be, where you are going to help frame the discussion about what it will look like for the next 150 years. So I want you to think about your work in that regard. I want you to think about your work in the regard to what it means in terms of longstanding principles about fighting for civil rights and justice and bringing equality. One of the things we've been doing in your California Department of Justice is I have a whole table of people over there. You all raise your hand, the California Department of Justice folks, and over here. Ask for their card if you want a job. One of the things, and over there, the head of our criminal division, what we've been talking about is the need for adoption of technology by government. So let me tell you what that's about. So we have been in the State Department of Justice doing something that is unprecedented for a State Department of Justice. We have been opening up the doors, opening up the window on all of our criminal justice data. We possess, probably second only to the United States Department of Justice, the most amount of criminal justice data about what's going on in the system. And we decided to share that with everyone. It's an initiative that is about open data. You all have heard that. Technology has brought that concept along. It's about big data. Back to the point about where you guys are coming out, compared to where we came out. When I came out of law school, we had big data. You know what it looked like? A really tall aluminum file cabinet with a whole bunch of files in it. That was big data. But now, because of technology, you can write the code that in seconds will tell you what's in there. Patterns, systems. You can engage in predictive policy. It's so exciting. Big data, open data. Well, government just holds on to all the data we keep. Think about the 3 essential functions of government. Public safety, public health, public education. I'm sure one of those 3 areas probably prompted some of you to decide you wanted to go to law school. Government maintains all that information about what's going on in those systems. But you know what we are as government? We're the same as we are as individuals, most of us. We don't like sharing our stuff. Transparency, that means you gotta let it all out there. People start picking it apart, finding little problems. Ooh, that puts you in a vulnerable position. Better to just hold on to it, right? One of the things that I'm obsessed with and your Department of Justice has been doing is saying, nope, time to share this information, open data. And then let's analyze it. And in that way, apply metrics to our analysis of our effectiveness instead of guiding public policy based on a pure and almost blind adherence to tradition. Let's start looking at the numbers. Let's start doing what our friends in the private sector do so well. They are cold-blooded in their analysis of effectiveness. You know what they ask when they're trying to figure out how we're doing? They ask a question that is guided by 3 letters. ROI, return on the investment, completely unburdened by ideology. What do the numbers look like? Well, data can tell us that. So I'm going to share with you what I'm talking about in its very, very specific and current application in the California Department of Justice. And then I'm going to close up my comments so we can hear from our guests and our panelists. So what that means is this. We are sharing all of the criminal justice data, and we started with 3 data sets. Now, we are in a world that is, we're calling it post-Ferguson, which has become a term of art, right? Folks your age, younger and older, are marching in the streets, right? Concerned about what's happening or what's not happening in terms of justice in the criminal justice system. So we started to roll out the data, starting with 3 data sets. Deaths in custody, arrest rates, and officers killed in the line of duty. We have challenged all the UC schools, USF, Stanford, a bunch of different schools, USC, Get in there, challenge your hypotheses, test your hypotheses. Let's figure out what's going on in the system. Because I know that in my office, we don't have the bandwidth or the skill set to do that kind of analysis that needs to be done. Here's what I can tell you without any analysis having been done. Two things that just the data tells us just without any deep analysis. African Americans are 6% of California's population and 25% of in-custody deaths. So, what does that then mean? And what do we do with that? Well, I look at some folks who might be some of the chiefs and sheriffs, not most of them. I look at other folks and I say, hey guys, you know how you're annoyed with Black Lives Matters? Well, guess what? With emotion and anecdote, they're telling us exactly what the data tells us. There are racial disparities. And so let's address that. Another bit of information the data shows us without much analysis at all. In custody deaths, everything from traffic stop through convicted and sentenced to jail, prison, all in custody. 80% of in custody deaths in California, in jail or prison. Not the kid running during an arrest being shot in the back. Of the 80% in custody, 60% natural causes. That's what I said when they first told me. Didn't know that. 10% suicides. Well, so then, and I see all the question marks going up above everyone's heads, as it's still going in mine. Well, what did they die of? What are we doing about thinking about public policy and how it might actually be smarter and more cost-effective to also think about public health among incarcerated populations? All kinds of interesting issues. Data. And so I'm going to close up my comments by saying this. You all are going to come out of school at a really interesting time in our world. And I want you to think about how you apply everything that is happening in your backyard around technology, around smart systems, around communication, in a way that understands those are the things that are some of the most important tools a lawyer can have. And then when we think about our responsibility to stand on the shoulders of those folks who have come before us, be they on this panel or the folks we read about in our history books, think about how you can apply everything that is available to you right now at this moment in time to build on their legacy around your personal pursuit of justice. You have such brilliant minds. And you stand on the shoulders of brilliant people who imagine that we would have this moment in time where I might be able to stand before you and talk about Black history. And so I want to thank you all for being here and who you are. I want to thank our panelists, and please continue, and thank you very much. Thank you.
Are you excited to be here? Yes.